This is the Lew Rockwell Show.
Well, what an honor it is to have as our guest this morning Dr. Ron Paul. Ron, of course, the congressman from Texas, more important, the author of so many important books, most recently End the Fed, the man who, with his presidential campaign, and I might say his entire public life, has inspired millions of especially young Americans and young people all over the world for the cause of liberty and sound money, of peace, and of opposing the sort of runaway government that's happening in the U.S. right now. And Ron, first let's talk about the Fed. I mean, you, of course, have always been the key battler against central banking and against the Federal Reserve, Greenspan, Bernanke, and all of them. What's happening with your bill to audit the Fed?
Well, right now is sort of in limbo. We got it into the reform package in the House. As bad as the package is, that's one item in that reform package that's worth something. In the Senate, we didn't get enough strong support over there, and the Republicans didn't really fight for it. And the Senate side, it is not included. Matter of fact, they have included Mal Watts' language, and his language and my language competed in the House Financial Services Committee, and of course we won that pretty easily. But they inserted that in, so Mal Watt and the bankers were able to influence the senators enough to put their language in there. So what probably will happen is the two bills will be passed. It'll be in one bill and not the other, and then the fight will be to put pressure on the conference to go with this House instead of the Senate. You know,
Ron, Mel Watt, of course, is known not as the congressman from North Carolina, but as the congressman from Bank of America. So he, of course, represents the banking industry. Obviously, the banking industry is benefited by the Fed. That's why they set up the Fed back so many years ago in Jekyll Island, Georgia, as you've talked about. So don't you feel, however, regardless of what these, how shall I characterize them, these gentlemen in Congress do with your idea of Fed transparency, don't you feel that it's been an incredible success already in terms of alerting Americans, engaging Americans, enraging Americans about this, what the central bank does, and how they want to hide it all?
Yeah, and I think regardless of what happens in a technical fashion with the legislation, we've won a whole lot. And besides, you know, if we got it passed, then we'd have to worry about whether the president's going to sign it, and then he probably would sign it with a signing statement and maybe never get carried out. But the other thing is the Fed would fight it in the court, just like they are fighting the Freedom of Information Act suits, even though they're losing a little bit there. I don't expect the Fed to give up easily. I could see them destroying records before a true audit would occur. But like you point out, the real benefit is the exposure of the Fed to the general public. And this is very, very healthy because I work on the assumption that we should do everything possible to slow this mess up, do what we can to make positive changes, but also work on the assumption that they probably are going to go ahead and drive us into bankruptcy with the destruction of the dollar and a lot more financial chaos. Then the more people that are informed, the more likely it is that we will resort to sound money and get people to understand why paper money doesn't work. So that's where we're making the progress. And as you know, the college campuses have come alive with this issue, and I know a lot more people are interested in studying Austrian economics. So I'm very pleased with what's happening outside of Washington. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the only thing that really counts ultimately.
You know, Ron, if I can make a personal note, like you, I've been interested in this issue for decades. And for the longest time when you would try to talk to anybody about it, well, the Federal Reserve, that was the name on the bill in their pocket, in their wallet. But otherwise, their eyes would glaze over and they were totally uninterested. They did not realize they were being ripped off. They didn't realize what it meant politically, constitutionally, economically. But building on the work of Mises and Rothbard and Hayek and Hazlitt and all the great Austrians, you have made people aware of it. So that today, you know, and I think back to that amazing time during your presidential campaign on the University of Michigan campus, where the kids all started chanting, "End the Fed, end the Fed."
Pretty good. The financial crisis certainly helped us, and this called attention to the people of how the bailouts occurred and how the Fed could create $2 trillion and pass it out and not even answer the questions to the Congress. But what do you think is going to happen when price inflation is roaring? I think there's still a lot of price inflation going on. They say there isn't, but I've always argued that there's a factor in the cost of medical care that pushes costs up too. So the inflation is around. So can you imagine, though, the attention we'll get if we have prices going up like they did in the 1970s? I think we will really get a lot more attention to the Fed, and that's healthy that we're directing attention to the proper place.
And, of course, this is why they're worried. This is why they don't like the tea parties. It's why they don't like the sorts of things that educate people about what the government is doing to them. We're all supposed to accept it. Now, here we have this, most recently, this Obamacare business,
right,
which has vastly expanded an already terrible federal intervention into medical care. What do you think lies ahead in that area?
Nothing good, because it's just going to compound our problems. The worst thing is, and the thing that I've always been concerned about, is the doctor-patient relationship, because I don't like anybody or anything to be between the doctor and the patient. The patient and the doctor should make the medical decisions, and they should be making the financial decisions. They lost the control of the financial decisions, and therefore they lost the control of the medical decisions. And this is going to get much, much worse. And I think the worst part of the bill is not so much what they're talking about. Well, they've talked about it some, but to me it's the worst thing is, and that is the elimination, not the elimination, but the undermining of the medical savings account where individuals can make some decisions. But now everybody is being forced. You don't have any choice in the matter. I argue that as bad as public education is, if a person is alert, there's still enough freedom left that you can homeschool your kids and go to a private school and you can study on the internet and still survive. But in medicine now, you're not going to have a choice. You have to obey the government, and everything the government, every insurance company will have to obey all the rules of the government, which means now you have the management companies, you have the drug companies, you have the insurance companies, and now you have the government bureaucrats and the politicians who are changing the rules all the time. They've all gotten in between the doctor and patient. This will discourage even more doctors. More doctors will leave. The quality of people going into medicine will be diminished, and the cost will go up. And the ultimate answer to this for the bureaucrats is, now the demand is too great. We'll have to ration the care, and all I can see is the quality of the care will continue down.
Ron, I know that with doctors, for example, who take Medicare, and I want to mention that in your career as a physician delivering more than 4,000 babies and many other things, doing many other things for your patients, you never took Medicare or Medicaid. You were responsible to the patient. You wanted to maintain that employee-employer relationship because, of course, the doctor is the employee of the patient in a proper and free market system, not Blue Cross or the government or whatever. But I'm wondering, since already it's very troublesome, maybe illegal, for a doctor who's taking Medicare to have private patients, are they going to make it illegal for any doctor to have private patients, to have an entirely private medical practice?
Probably, except for themselves, the politicians. You know, like in the Soviet Union, they always had a private doctor take care of them. So I don't think it's going to happen real soon, but that's liable to be what will happen. They will move in that direction, and of course that will be very unfortunate.
I remember in the early days of when Obama first started talking about this, he was at one of his town meetings, and there was an actual question asked by a doctor, and he said, "Will you pledge to the American people that if your plan goes through, that you and your family will be under it, and you will not use your political power to get yourself or your family better care than the average American?" So Obama paused for, and I have to give him credit. He said, "No, I won't promise that." So he.
Oh boy, that should have awakened everybody, shouldn't it?
Yeah, well, of course, somehow the media don't talk about that, but of course that's right. None of these people, and I hear even the congressional staffers who wrote the bill are now being exempted from it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just signed on to a bill that would change that, and not only for the members of Congress, but for all the staff people. They would have to get into the same system. But the politicians and the government officials, they tend to protect themselves all the time.
And I thought it's amazing, an amazing clarification of the whole Obamacare, as you've pointed out, that this bill hires another 16,500 IRS agents.
Yeah, they need to collect some more money. They're pretending that this isn't going to cost anything, but that it's been estimated that the hidden taxes has to be about $400 billion. But this idea that you can give 30 million people free medical care and actually save enough money to reduce the deficit is so preposterous. I think that helps just totally destroy their credibility. But just the whole idea that this depends on more thugs, more people coming along, more force, more violence. You know, they worry about the violence of anybody and everybody except the government, it seems. But that's what it is, government violence. That means IRS agents, they're going to carry guns, they're going to collect these, they're going to enforce these rules, and they're going to make sure everybody does what they're told.
Ron, I noticed that the Republicans, and of course the Republicans are saying they're going to repeal this. I noticed the Republicans, of course, have never repealed anything in the entire history of the Republican Party, and they all were for, except you and a few others, were all for Bush's crazy Medicare Part D expansion of the welfare state. But I noticed now they're going after you, maybe even talking about taking away your committee chairmanship or your ranking membership on the Monetary Policy Subcommittee in the next Congress, because you are one of the ones who would not go along with the moratorium on so-called earmarks. So what do you think? What is this about?
Well, that's been ongoing, but it seems to be coming to a climax. It's coming to a climax right now because the Republicans had said we were going to voluntarily not list any earmarks. Of course, my idea of an earmark is just designating how the spending should be done. And if the government robs the people with highway funds, it just seems logical to me that if there's a reasonable request, you as a member of Congress should request some of your money back and designate it for a particular highway. But that's called an earmark, and you're not supposed to do that. And they use this to pretend they're, really, really tight on the budget. If you're building an embassy in Baghdad, no, that's not an earmark. That doesn't count. Or a weapon system, that's not an earmark. It's only if you're bringing money back to the district. But my big argument there is the prerogatives of the Congress. The Congress has the responsibility. They've reneged on it, and over many, many decades, they keep giving up their responsibilities and their obligations, and they deliver this responsibility to the executive branch. And they're not bashful about that position. Many members of the Congress openly say, well, you have to have the president this power. They have to have the power to go to war and to arrest people and torture people and all these things. So I don't want to give them 1 ounce of authority or power, the executive branch, that is not given to them in the Constitution. So I've taken this very strong position saying, yes, we should designate more, not less, but we should vote against the spending because all the spending is very, very bad. The interesting that has happened on this, though, is since they sort of badgered all the members into this voluntary effort to not ever ask for an earmark, so many members have come to me now and they said, boy, I sure wished I'd have taken your position, because they know what it means, and they know that it doesn't make any sense, and now they know that there's actually a constitutional argument that could defend that position. So I don't think that thing is going to amount to anything, but it has been in print. Yesterday it was in print that the leadership has threatened that they would take subcommittee chairmanships away. But if that had been my goal in life and in the Congress, I wouldn't have taken a break. I'd have stayed. I'd have played their games. I'd have built up seniority, and I right now would qualify to be the chairman of the Financial Service Committee. But that would be despicable as far as I'm concerned, because you'd have had to toe the line and accommodate the bankers because they wouldn't let you do it anyway. So I just think this whole argument over the earmarks from the so-called fiscal conservatives is nothing more than a red herring.
Ron, I well remember when a foreign government operating through a very powerful Republican reached into the Congress and prevented you from being on a committee because you were against foreign aid. And, of course, the bankers have, in cooperation with the bad guys in the Republican Party, even abolished a subcommittee once to prevent you from being chairman of it. And, of course, that didn't affect your positions. You still stick to your positions. You still have your principles. And, obviously, this is not going to work either. And, in fact, I predict that if they try this, the whole Ron Paul movement is going to mobilize. And if they think they've seen anything with the Tea Parties, they better wait till they see that happen. And let me just emphasize again for people listening, earmarks do not increase spending. They're simply an allocation of spending. So the question is, from a constitutional standpoint, a division of power standpoint, should spending decisions be made by the Congress or by the bureaucrats in the presidential branch? And all these people who are attacking earmarks as you say, are for the president being able to declare war on his own, torture people, declare Americans as enemy combatants and torture them, maybe kill them, assassinate them. So they believe in a presidential dictatorship. So your stance on the whole earmark question is just part and parcel of your opposition to presidential dictatorship.
Yeah. You know, if you cut spending, every once in a while there will be a vote on cutting an earmark, and it does designate this must be cut in the spending, but it's very, very rare. Most of it means the money just goes to the executive branch, and they make all the decisions.
Well, Dr. Ron Paul, you're an inspiration, and sure is great to have you on the show. And I want to remind everybody of your latest book, End the Fed. Take a look at all of Ron Paul's books. And, Ron, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Glad to be on your program.
Bye-bye. Ron, thank you.
You've been listening to The Lew Rockwell Show. Produced by LewRockwell.com, the best-read libertarian website in the world. If you'd like to advertise on this podcast or on the website, email advertise@LewRockwell.com. And thanks for listening.